So let's just look a little bit at origin story, let's say, of Tara, for example. Something we might be able to look at. So we think that Tara is a real deity. That's generally what we do. And then there's this famous kind of Pandita, one of the India's masters from the past, and he was asked, his name was Suryagupta, he was asked to explain where Tara came from, where this myth came from. And this is the most common thing that would be presented to you. So he's asked, what was her origin? And the Suryagupta answers, the Avalokiteshvara, the Lord of Refuge of the three realms, desire, form, and formless realm, which depend on the five aggregates or four aggregates that perish in an instant, saw that however many migrating beings he removed from samsara, they grew no fewer, and so he wept. So as we know, Avalokiteshvara is what we call Chandrasik, the Lord of Love. And the Lord of Love is what we call a Bodhisattva, right? Now, most of you will know what a Bodhisattva is. A Bodhisattva is somebody who makes this commitment to liberate all sentient beings in samsara. We've got this idea, there's this place called samsara, it's full of suffering, and in order to get out of that, then we become like arhat, we follow the path of personal liberation, or we become a Buddha. And in the Mahayana, what we do is, we don't become a Buddha for ourselves, we enter into the Buddha path of becoming a Buddha in order to help others. And the idea is that a Bodhisattva sort of liberates all beings first before liberating themselves. And so what they do, rather than seeking personal liberation, is that they choose to be reborn within the mundane world, even if that's to be reborn in hell, at an appropriate time in order to help beings. And we talked a little bit about this a few days ago when we started the teachings on the ornament of liberation. We talked about the life story of this particular Bodhisattva, who is the previous incarnation of Gampopa. So Avalokiteshvara, Chandrasik, made this pledge to liberate all beings of the three realms. So in general, we talk about these three realms: desire realm, form realm, and formless realm. That's what composes the mundane world. And Chandrasik worked to liberate beings continuously for an eon or something, for a huge amount of time, and then looked back into samsara to see how many suffering beings there were and realized that they were still infinite. They'd not reduced in any way whatsoever. And this made Chandrasik give rise to a kind of, not regret, but kind of despair. And so he wept. And this is famously, when we hear this story, then we get this image of Chandrasik who has like 11 heads and 1,000 arms, because it's like this kind of, because he gave rise to despair on his Bodhisattva path and he exploded into millions of pieces. That's the kind of imagery we get. So the myth is that at this time when he wept, then he wept 2 tears, one from his right eye and one from his left eye, and these became respectively green Tara and white Tara. And so the essence of green Tara is method and is this sort of compassion that works for the benefit of beings. And the essence of white Tara is this wisdom. And so this is the story that we hear as to how Tara came about. And to us, of course, it sounds kind of anecdotal. It sounds like the kind of thing that we read in the Bible or any other religion, these fantastical things. But there's an important point here, right? The stories are inspirational. But there's a very important point here, because ultimately what it's saying in there is that, in this case, is that this bodhicitta, this loving kindness and compassion, which itself is the ultimate cause for awakening, itself is the ultimate cause for the arisal of ultimate compassion, right? This relative compassion is founded on 2 things. It's founded on this kind of wisdom, on this compassion, or this method, and this wisdom, these 2 things. And Tara represents the method aspect. And so what it's telling us is that in order to achieve the state of Bodhisattva or to become liberated as a Buddha, then we need to give rise to 2 things. We need methods, and we also need wisdom. And wisdom is the realization of emptiness, and the methods are various, but for ordinary beings like ourselves, then in the Mahayana, these methods are primarily about giving rise to loving kindness and compassion for sentient beings that we see to be in some way real, right? And it's a difficult question, because we say bodhisattvas, when they hit the path of insight, then they realize all sentient beings and all phenomena are empty, are not real. And then we ask, well, why is it that, If they see beings to be empty and not real, why on earth would they work to benefit them? It's a very difficult question. I won't go into the answer there. We'll probably talk about it more when we actually get into the body of the teachings. Essentially, what we need are what are called the two wings of the bird, right? A bird needs two wings to fly, and these are the aspects of method and wisdom. Emptiness alone is not enough. We need techniques, basically, and we need the conventional. If we remember the teachings of Nagarjuna famously taught, without understanding the conventional, there is no understanding of the ultimate. And without realization of the ultimate, then there is no liberation from samsara. And this is the same point, that we can't go directly to emptiness or to wisdom. We need to first rely on method and or rely on the conventional, especially as ordinary beings, right? Because for us, things appear to be real. If we have any understanding of the empty nature of reality, it's quite shallow. It never becomes a deeply embodied or profound realization of emptiness. It's merely conceptual. And so what we do is we use these sādhanas. And what is important about these sādhanas, or these pujas, is that they use what are called the 3 gates of virtue. So we have 3 gates of virtue. That's body, speech, and mind. And so what we do is we make a synthesis of all of these techniques, right? You know, for example, in the body aspect, we engage in things like mudra. If you look at all the sādhanas, then there's all these kinds of mudras that people do, right? Offering a lotus flower to sit on, etc. There's mudra we did earlier, the mandala offering mudra, etc. This is using the gate of virtue of body. And then we have the mantra, this is using virtue of speech. Also chanting the words that are full of meanings, the virtue of speech. But most important out of these is the virtue of mind. And in these sādhanas, these liturgies, then in the tantric tradition, primarily what we do is we use the creative power of the mind. So, you know, there's different ways we can use our mind virtuously. We can study scriptures. We can come to understand theory and philosophy. But what's kind of unique about these tantric practices is that we use this kind of ability that the mind has to create images, to imagine things, as a very profound transformative force that allows us to change our ordinary perception of reality. And so people who practice these sādhanas, these tantric practices, very sincerely, and as I said before, with very strong devotion, then they are able to make leaps and bounds in their practice on the basis of this. That's because it's a tried and tested methodology for giving rise to insight. And I've said this before many times, that it's not certain what will cause insight to arise in your mind. In fact, there's no real direct cause for insight itself, but there are conditions under which we drop our misconception. There are conditions under which we lose our clinging to our principal narrative, which is this belief in substantial existence. And when those conditions are met, then it gives us the opportunity to recognize or have a glimpse of the ultimate meaning. And from my own experience, then I see the efficacy of this kind of practice. Having done a traditional 4-year retreat, then we went through many different types of sadhanas, and these are all within a different class of tantra. They're the Uttara Tantra, unexcelled Yoga Tantra. And basically it's a very similar process, but it's far more kind of in-depth in terms of richness and symbology. But I can't get into that much. I will say a little bit about the tantras themselves, though, the yogas and the tantras themselves.